Welcome, everyone, to Wizards and Warp Drives, the podcast where three grown-ass men get deeply nerdy about the things they love. My name is Nacho, and joining me as per usual is Fred from How to RPG, and the mighty glue stick himself, Mr. AJ Pickett.
How's it going? I've been dreaming about droids.
Dreaming about droids. Star Wars is the
Droid
topic.
rights, man. Droid rights.
Yep. How's everyone's week been?
Pretty fantastic.
So not too bad, actually. Not too stressful. Yeah.
Before we get into the topic, I just want to ask one question. Has D&D fixed crafting?
I don't know yet.
No, I had a look. I've
No.
done a lot of videos on crafting for Dungeons and Dragons from 2014, and they have reshuffled things, they've repositioned things, but in many respects, it's essentially the same. Look, I think that the truth of the matter is we won't know until the Dungeon Master Guide is actually released and we see what they've actually written down on the page. But I can see that they have just rearranged stuff. So
I'm excited that tools seem to have a consequence now. Like having a toolkit might mean something. I think that's a good move.
I'm just glad they're staying away from spending experience points to make magic items. That always sucked.
Yeah, it did, and I agree absolutely. And I think you're right. They did stipulate to make a magic item, right? You had to have Arcana as a proficient skill, otherwise forget it. And you needed to have a tool proficiency or the tool. I think you probably have the tool proficiency and the tool, although I think they only mentioned the tool itself.
Yeah.
For whatever it is. So if you would if you're making a wand, you had to have carpentry skills and the tools for doing that, or and then
the spell to infuse it.
Yeah, exactly. Which makes perfect sense. So it's like a 3-step process: Arcana, the tools and the equipment, and the magic tool, and that you're actually going to imbue into the magic item. So
I like it. What they're saying, I like the sound of it. It sounds nice and simple, and it makes sense. And it's easy to explain to players. So we'll see. Anyway,
it gets the idea across, and that's what you really need in a role-playing game.
Yep. Anyway, that's not what we're talking about today.
No.
I just wanted to get that out there. Today we're going to start Star Wars. We've been wanting to talk about Star Wars for a long time, and it's such a big subject. I could just
long time ago.
Yeah, so I've kind of divided it into sections. So today we're going to focus on the original trilogy.
Mm-hmm.
We're just talking about how I can't pronounce this word, and I just fucked it up within, what are we at, 2 minutes of the podcast? Great. A New Hope for Sci-Fi Cinema.
Yeah. So for those of you who feel like the phonetics around trilogy and triology or triology, like depending on where you are in the world, seriously, everybody's going to have a slightly different sound on the I and the R. So, yeah.
It's Trilogy for those who like to say GIF instead of GIF or GIF or GIF.
Yeah, that's a new one for me. Cool.
Yeah.
Let's add another one to the pile.
Parmesan.
Yeah. Some of us that don't speak very well decide to do podcasts as well. So don't pick on me, mate.
Well, there's one way to improve your speaking voice. It's by doing it professionally.
Yeah. I always said this is a mental health podcast in disguise.
It's a mental health group.
All right. So I've broken it up into sections. So setting the stage, sci-fi cinema, pre-Star Wars, and the vision of George Lucas. So pre-Star Wars, sci-fi, I think, was pretty much considered a niche genre. Only really appealing to sort of a small, dedicated fan base rather than mainstream audiences. It was kind of limited by its technology. Special effects and visual technology was, I think, there were exceptions like 2001, Planet of the Apes. They really pushed the boundaries. And it often focused on more of a dystopian feel. Things like The Day the Earth Stood Still, Soylent Green, more sort of cerebral and philosophical, rather than sort of blockbusters. And those sci-fi films kind of struggled. They weren't considered, major blockbusters. Obviously, Lucas took influences from things like Flash Gordon, samurai films like The Hidden Fortress and Metropolis, and kind of infused it into a sort of like a more of an operatic, serialized type adventure.
Well, it's a fantasy story, really. I mean, you've got space wizards, spells, the Force and stuff, and they've got laser swords,
Mm.
so magic swords. It's very, very fantasy in many ways, and that's why I think Krull, the movie, exists, because they're
Mm.
trying to emulate the sort of fantasy sci-fi aspect of it. But Krull is definitely more fantasy.
Oh, Kroll is definitely influenced by it. We wouldn't have Kroll without Star Wars. Yeah,
Yeah.
Star Wars. A lot of
These
films.
days they would come out at the same time, but Krull would be like the Netflix streaming show.
Mm.
Yeah, and Star Wars would be the big thing. But Star Wars was, I don't think they really knew it was going to be successful. Um,
No,
and
I think uh, one of the things that they did is the last act. Well, so the last act of the three stories that he was thinking about with the Death Star was not actually in Star Wars, which is now called A New Hope, right?
yeah,
That was actually in what was essentially called the Return of the Jedi. So this is why the Death Star shows up twice. He
Mm.
assumed that he would never get to make more than one of these. So he just ported what he essentially thought was the best part. He needed something at the end that was a major threat, and so
so
that's what he
here's
did.
so here's something really interesting. In 1972, the cover for the Star Science Fiction Stories #4 had the artwork by a guy named John Berkeley, and it is a very X-wingy looking spaceship which is heading towards a mechanized moon that looks very much like the Death Star. And that was the inspiration that Lucas grabbed, and he grabbed Macquarie, who worked as part of the three-man team that were they were an art concept art group that did stuff for like the Boeing 747 instruction manual for constructing the thing, and also worked on the Apollo program,
Mm.
Space Apollo program, all the sort of concept art and stuff. So this is Hal Barwood and Macquarie, Matthew Robbins, and yeah, but this John Berkeley artwork was one of the things where Lucas went, this this is what I want to do. And so he basically got Macquarie to do these concept art pieces, which would then take to the film studios in order to secure funding from 20th Century Fox and various others. But the Death Star was definitely there from the very beginning. It was like that was what Lucas
Yep.
was heading towards. And a lot of the concept art really guided the whole script. Like the C-3PO in the desert of Tatooine is bang on exactly what Macquarie envisaged, and a lot of it's just so consistently good that the concept artwork was followed to the letter by the construction guys and set guys and things like that. They really, really, you could say that the whole look of Star Wars started with Macquarie, and Lucas
Mm.
has been true to form the entire way through. And if
I
if
think
anything, it's gotten grittier, but yeah, the mechanical aeronautic sort of look of it was from that artwork.
Lucas was clever. I think he drew from lots of things. He definitely, just like we do with D&D Adventures, he harvested everything. He
Mm.
Because he took the mythology from like the hero's journey, the classic narrative structure of like the hero, the mentor, the villain.
Mhm.
He kind of combined it with Western fantasies and samurai sort of films to create sort of this new space opera sort of hybrid.
Mm.
And he took existing art, and he just combined it all into one sort of vision of a
Yeah.
blockbuster.
And you notice in a lot of American movies, they've got to have a car chase scene and stuff like that. Well, Lucas, of course, had produced American Graffiti, and he was right into cars, hot rods, hot rod culture, that sort of thing. So Han Solo was obviously um,
Mm.
a Dean Martin. What is it, Dean? The Without a Cause guy?
Yeah.
Died in a car
Yeah.
crash?
No, I know who you're
Steve
thinking.
McQueen or Dean Martin?
No.
Dean Martin?
Uh,
James Dean.
oh,
James
James
Dean.
Dean. James
There you
Dean.
go.
Sorry, oh God.
Yeah.
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 Dean Martin,
Or
somebody else.
Marlon Brando,
Yeah.
and so he was that anti-hero type character, and of course
Mm.
we have the X-wings going down the Death Star tunnel, is drag racing down through, getting
Do you know
shot at.
Harrison Ford was a carpenter? He was a carpenter at George Lucas' house before he got cast as
What a
Yeah.
good way to get into the industry.
Yeah, he
Just hang
was.
out at the producer's house until they give you a job. Yeah. No, he's a smart guy. He also sold a lot of weed.
Yeah, he's a
yeah.
big weed smoker.
So
Yeah.
Anyway.
there's actually three other things that I would say that influenced Star Wars that probably people don't. Maybe they're aware of it partly, but the American Western is a
Mm.
huge element.
Yep.
But also, and people may not be aware of this, the soap opera. The episodic soap opera
Mm.
has had such a huge influence. If you look at it and you take away all of the lightsabers, the technology, the spaceships, it's essentially a family soap opera.
Yes. It's a bunch of kids rebelling against their father. Who's an asshole?
Yeah. Who's a complete dick, you know? But also too, there's another influence that a lot of people are probably not aware of, and that is Edgar Rice Burroughs and the Princess of Mars and the Barsoom Martian series.
Tatooine. Yeah.
Because literally there are things in there that have been ported over to Star Wars, like, you know, the Bantha. There's literally a Bantha in the Princess of Mars and Mars series, and he's literally got himself something called the Bantha. And he does this many, many, many times. It was a shame that when John Carter came out, everybody thought that they were stealing from Star Wars and George Lucas, when it's actually completely the other way around. There's another thing I think, you know, before Star Wars came out, you were mentioning how science fiction was, you know, low budget, and it really was. They were low budget stories, and their stories were always generally around concern over technology, warnings of danger. And science fiction, but also fantasy and even horror, were all like B and C grade movies. They never got the same sort of screenwriters, the same sort of money thrown at them. Many of the stories involved showing off. If they did have any kind of special effects that was worth showing off, they would spend a lot of time showing that off, which Star Wars often doesn't do, which is weird, right? Because you'd think you want to show off as much of the stuff as possible, but they didn't. And a lot of fantasy and science fiction film went straight to television late night shows because nobody watched the things, and so the late night, very few people watching them. No prime time location for them, so it was a very different kettle of fish to suddenly see a sci-fi movie that had fantasy elements and Western elements, which had pretty much died at that point in 1977. And then suddenly,
nod to the serialized, like as you said, influenced by Flash Gordon, a trilogy of science fiction movies had not been done, as far as I know. So yeah.
I mean, he started at episode 4, so
right.
you know,
and that's one of the things that, like, I think the modern audience takes for granted. Like me, growing up with Star Wars and the original series, The Mandalorian. So Boba Fett was a very popular character, and there was that lore in the background that Boba Fett was the original stormtrooper, the original fighter, and he was the model of the original clone troopers and stuff in the Clone Wars. We knew nothing about the Clone Wars. It was just said one line in the movie, and we sort of had to imagine it.
You're dipping into prequel material there. Like Boba Fett was originally appeared. I think his first appearance was on that terrible Christmas special as a cartoon, and then he became a toy that got banned because he was a choking hazard.
Yeah, because of the firing missile toy. Yeah, he showed up originally. He was with the bounty hunters who Darth Vader sent after the guys. It was like no disintegrations, and the mention of the Clone Wars was when old Ben Kenobi was telling about, you know, his father, and I fought with him in the Clone Wars, and that was the only mention he had of the Clone Wars. But it was only afterwards that we learned that the whole, you know, Boba Fett was the model for all the clones and stuff like that.
Another thing he did as well is the
idea that it would one day be a Kiwi never occurred to us.
Yeah.
Impossible. If you told us back then, it would have been, Dad, Qui-Gon's here. We would have heard that voice coming out of the screen.
When we get to the prequels, we'll talk about that. But that was one of my issues with the prequels, was Star Wars was always set in a galaxy far, far away, not the local fish and chip shop up there.
Our accent is pretty out there, so maybe we sound like a bunch of clones talking, doing a podcast to other people.
He also created when he did Star Wars, he pushed the boundaries of technology with the creation of industrial light and magic, inventing entirely new techniques for special effects, motion controlled cameras for the space battles and stuff. I mean, that studio was built on the backbones of Star Wars.
Yeah.
As well.
Yeah, they
So
had they built the set of the surface of the ships and things like that. So the ships, the big capital ships, were not moving. They were a big set piece because they're like 7 feet long or 11 feet long. And then they set up the camera to move over the surface and give it a depth of field thing. And then they spliced together lots of shots. Like one of the earliest bits of the first bit of actual finished sci-fi effect film they did was the launching of the escape pod with the droids on it. That was the first finished bit of special effects that the studio showed Lucas when he came in to see what have you got for your 6 months of effort and the hundreds of thousands of dollars I've given you. Oh, this one scene. And Lucas sort of lost his shit. Yeah, but
I would put that opening scene of I'm sorry for the future. I'm not calling this film A New Hope. This film's Star Wars. I'm of a certain age where I would put down that opening scene of Star Wars as one of the greatest opening scenes of all time. That chase with the ship and then the Star Destroyer
every movie
coming behind it.
I wait for that first scene. So good.
It's just
So are we talking about the 3 movies now, or are we talking about the technology behind making those movies?
Well, we'll get more deep into the technology. We're kind of just really just going through the vision of Lucas and his influences. Do you want to go through the movies?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's do the movies.
So, 1977, we got Star Wars, or as it's known now as A New Hope. It was Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope, as we knew it. Introduction to the galaxy. So obviously it introduced us to this lived-in, expansive galaxy with a rich lore, diverse planets, even though every planet just seems to have one ecosystem. It wasn't like anything we've seen before. It was a simple story. It's just a classic hero's journey. A farm boy discovers his destiny to rescue a princess and destroy a Death Star. But it did have like groundbreaking effects, setting the standard for space battles and special effects and sci-fi moving forward, and introduced us to a lot of really iconic characters such as Luke, Leia, Han Solo, Darth Vader, and Obi-Wan. And it was an unexpected success as well. It was expected to flop. But it became a cultural phenomenon, breaking box office records around the world.
People lined up around the block. Yeah, well, it had some brutal scenes in it, like the Aunt Beru and Uncle Owen being smouldering corpses when he gets back home. That was quite a shocker.
That's the kind of figure I want. The smoking. The smoking corpse one.
Yeah, smoking corpse. The new smoking corpse, the Aunt Beru vape pen. Yeah. And the droids and stuff that they had in there was really cool, like a walking, talking droid. C-3PO was quite cutting edge. And R2-D2 being a non-vocal character was quite interesting as well. The fact that everybody could talk to R2-D2 and understand him well, most of them. But we were just left with this. It's like, what is he actually saying? I don't know. It's just C-3PO's having a conversation.
They were kind of
that we're just hearing his side of it.
The Laurel and Hardy, weren't they?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
very much so. Yeah, Abbott and Costello, Laurel and Hardy.
The classic sort of straight man, comic relief type.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's like, I don't like space battles.
C-3PO, the design, George's original idea was to have some sort of oily, sort of junkyard mechanic as the character, and it became C-3PO instead. So a lot of things did change. Like there was a lot of influence by specifically the British sort of creative teams, like whether it was the model makers or the writers or anything like that. They had a huge influence on where things went. It's even more amusing as some of them even modeled some of the stuff off their own faces, which was hilarious.
Yeah.
And it had
when
Peter Cushing
you have a bunch of
well.
creative people who are really pushed to create a new technology, they were in uncharted territory, and they were operating in a vacuum. Like the guys doing the special effects for the spaceships and stuff, and that film work were completely separate from the Tunisian people who were like the Tunisian craft doing all of the Tatooine stuff in Tunisia. And then you've got the UK team who are, basically all of the technical staff and crew were the UK based, but the actors were all Americans. So apart from McGuinness and C-3PO was British.
I
And
don't
R2-D2
believe
was
that's
British.
true. I remember George saying that he was frustrated with the people in the UK because of the outcry, because he had literally had his crew were all from the UK, all British.
Yeah.
His most of the cast were all British. That's why you got Alec Guinness and Cushing. And then he said, "I've only got 3 actors in the whole fucking movie that are American," and that was Hamill, Carey, and of course Harrison Ford.
Yeah, even
And he said,
Darth
and
Vader
they
was
still whined
British.
about this.
It wasn't James Earl Jones at the start. It was Freddie something or other.
Yeah, no, they dubbed it afterwards because he had a terrible accent. Yeah,
it just wasn't. Yeah,
Hamill, Ford, and Fisher were all pretty much unknowns, and Peter Cushing and Alex Guinness were the only sort of reputable actors. I don't even think Alex Guinness understood what type of movie he was in.
He understood because he got the best deal out of all of those actors, which was a percentage. He's the only one who got a percentage of the take, and he basically that bought him a mansion and a car, and set him up for the rest of his life. Basically, his retirement fund.
Wasn't it 2.5 or 2.25% of the net profit, not the gross profit, but the net profit?
Yeah.
There
was a lot of. We'll get to it when we get to merchandising, but there was a lot of deals that people got super rich on because the studio had no faith in this, especially Lucas. And there are some great scenes in there. My favorite scene from Star Wars is that bit when that guy gives Vader some shit at a staff meeting and he just chokes him out.
Yeah, I find your lack of faith disturbing.
Yeah. It's weird. It's weird how when I think about Star Wars and I think about all the movies that were made, but specifically the first 3 movies that were made, it's really kind of the perfect story in terms of its pacing, how the movie's made. It's actually pretty spot on. It's super simple. It's not convoluted or complicated, and it involves a hero, it involves a princess, and it involves a bad guy in black. And it involves a death or a doomsday device of some kind.
Yeah. But we're going to spoil the shit out of this, by the way. So if anyone hasn't seen it,
the statute of limitations is passed for Star Wars. Okay, we're fine.
But one of the things that I always thought in terms of the story, because it wrapped, Star Wars wrapped everything up quite neatly and tidily. You could have just stopped there and not gone on, and it wouldn't need another movie, right? Except for one thing that happens in that movie at the very end when Darth Vader's starship is knocked out of the way by the Millennium Falcon and he goes spinning off into space, and you're like, okay, everything's good. And at this point, I figure the Death Star's been destroyed, the Empire's been defeated, but what happened to Darth Vader? He just spun off into space, and it was the only thing I could think of that was left
water,
uncleaned up.
Oh well, we got a Christmas special to answer a lot of those questions.
Personally, I don't think Star Wars is the best and most succinct movie of that sci-fi movie ever made. I think that was the 1950s, The Day the Earth Stood Still. That's probably the tightest script, one of the most lean, best composed movies.
Do you think this is though? Do you think Star Wars? Do you think Star Wars is the first science fiction blockbuster of all time?
It's the first blockbuster of all time.
Jaws is prior Star Wars.
Look, that did well, but there was nothing in that time frame when I was growing up that was anywhere near as crazy. And we're going to talk about this. It was the blockbuster. After that, everybody wanted to duplicate that. Yeah,
Star Wars.
Yes. They literally let C-3PO and R2-D2 put their prints as well as Darth Vader. They're not actors putting their footprints and so forth. These are fictional characters into the
So
into the cement outside the Chinese theatre. It was ridiculous.
we
Basically
would have all been
dominated Halloween for the next 10 years.
Yeah.
we would have all been kids around this time. And you were seriously ostracized if you hadn't seen Star Wars, because there was no going to streaming. There was no video. VHS didn't exist.
I don't even remember when I first saw it, honestly.
I remember seeing it at the cinema.
Right.
Distinctly, yeah, that opening scene just, I just remember my jaw hitting the floor. I don't think I ate my popcorn. I think I just sat there with my jaw open for the entire film. Yeah. All right. So 3 years later, we got the sequel, Empire Strikes Back. This time not directed by Lucas. So this is something that always surprises me, and I know it's a fact, but I'm always surprised that he only actually directed 2 out of 3 of the first films. So this one's directed by Irvin Kershner. A darker tone, explored more complex themes of failure, sacrifice, and redemption, pushing the story just beyond its sort of simple adventure story, I guess. We got the iconic Vader revelation. I am your father. I mean, that's one of the greatest cinematic lines of all time. Character development, it expanded on the arcs. So Luke he trains as a Jedi. Han and Leia's relationship develops. Vader becomes more of a nuanced villain. We also got the introduction of Yoda, the legendary Jedi Master, and Yoda became a fan favorite and probably one of the saga's most enduring symbols of wisdom. And we got the cliffhanger ending. The film ends with the hero scattered and on the defensive, setting the stage for the conclusion. That ending, I've never come out of a movie like that. I remember, just sitting in the car on the drive home, just what?
Yeah. What?
That is not the right response, Nacho. I remember Empire Strikes Back. I think Empire Strikes Back for a lot of people is considered to be the better of the movies in terms of story and so forth. Darker scenes, more character driven, shocking revelations, a much slower movie, but also an incomplete story. It is, for me, it is actually not a great movie because it doesn't finish.
Ooh.
It's the most depressing conclusion.
Controversial opinions.
Oh, no, seriously though, it's the most depressing conclusion to a movie to say Han Solo is lost and now we have to go and search him out. We knew how long we had to wait to get the second movie after Star Wars. It was a long time. For a kid, 3 years is like forever. And I remember sitting in the theater with my brother and my grandmother, who I went and saw Empire Strikes Back with. And my brother looks at me and says, "Are you kidding me?" And I said, "I don't understand what's going on here." And what the heck?
Can't do this.
They stopped right there. Like, you can't stop there. And then my grandmother looked at me and she said, "What's going on? Is this the end of the movie?" And I thought, yeah, they just stopped. But isn't Han Solo like,
It's the equivalent
said,
of a pop
exactly.
song just fading out, while they're still playing.
I want to just say something funny that just entered my brain when we were doing this, when I was doing some research. The one good thing about Han being frozen in carbonite is he doesn't have to listen to that fucking awful song, Jedi Rocks.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
But
It didn't get improved with the remastering, but we'll get to that.
But I remember being so disappointed by the end of Empire Strikes Back. For whatever had happened before, it felt like it was the middle of a story. It didn't feel like it was a complete entity.
I understand.
And we weren't used to trilogies.
And my grandmother was like, how long do we have to wait for them to finish the story? Because my brother was like, it was so frustrating. It is still to this very day the one movie that pisses me off the most.
The first one's free, then the second one kicks in. You realize I'm addicted to this shit, and it's over too soon.
Oh my god!
I could see your grandmother complaining, going, "I want half my money back. I want half my money back because he only gave me half a movie."
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So first of all, we got the Empire showing its true strength in the Battle of on Hoth. So we got to see the AT-AT walkers, massive big warships, and the fight with the A-wings and the harpoon scene and all. It was tense. It was tense. Luke started his hero's journey, his shamanistic his transformation into the Jedi. The mystical side of Luke really started to begin when he went through the whole ordeal in Hoth in the cave and his reaching for this lightsaber. And then he had the vision of Ben Kenobi appearing to him as a ghost, a Force ghost, and saying, "You must go to see Yoda." And he's like, "Ben, what the fuck?" So that is very Norse mythology. That mystical through you gain mystical insight through torment and transformation through trauma. Right, so that's really strong historical sort of fantasy element to it, which I found really compelling. So I think Luke's story in the Empire Strikes Back is the strongest part of his story, and then when he gets to the next movie, it's more like he's masquerading as a full Jedi Master, but it's like you can almost feel the imposter syndrome, and Jabba sees straight through him, which I thought was really interesting. But of course, he ended up being very wrong. But we'll get to that.
I like it. This is my favorite of the three films. But I like downer endings. This is probably why films like Children of Men and The Mist are up there for me for favorite films. As a kid, I understand what you're saying, Fred. It left me shattered, but it also left me thirsty for more.
And it's got some of the most iconic scenes, like "I am your father," and he loses his hand and starts becoming Darth Vader. And there's that whole confrontation where he's facing his dark side, that he is going to turn into Darth Vader.
Yeah, it's just I love that film. It's got all, like you say, the iconic introduction of the bounty hunters, Cloud City, Lando.
Yeah, not a big fan of Lando and the whole Bespin thing.
Yeah, Cloud City was not my favorite part. I did prefer Hoth, and I did prefer the scenes around them being chased through the asteroids and the training on the planet with Yoda. I think those were the bits that I really sort of got more attached to. And with the Cloud City was just like, it almost felt like it was out of place a little bit. It was weird.
I would have liked the fight scene between Vader and Luke, how they had it inside Bespin. It should have been like in the prequels and stuff later on. Well, later on.
Yeah.
Like in the Mustafar, with they're on these floating platforms over lava. So Bespin is floating down, hundreds of thousands of meters up in the sky, over a gas giant. So if you fall to your doom, that's it, you're dead. So it would have been like, I would have had them on scaffolds and floating platforms and droids that were flying by.
I love the vista.
But they couldn't do shit like that.
I love the background, the vista of that fight with that big round window. I think, it's my favorite out of the three.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, they were really playing on the light and dark aspect, and the lightsabers being different colors. So they're setting iconic sort of themes to Jedi being dark and red. And
that scene. Remember that scene when he has to go into the cave and fight Vader, and then the mask falls off, and it's his face under the mask. There were just so many. It didn't feel like I was watching a kids' film anymore. It really, and I think I respected it, that it was showing me things that I was uncomfortable with. It made me feel a little bit more grown up, and I like the idea of being, I don't know, it just felt more dangerous. It really appealed to me, and I think it's a great film. So
it definitely had the danger aspect to it. It did feel like there was much more danger going on. It was certainly a lot darker. It really was.
We also see that the seeds of Luke's downfall are there right from the very beginning, where Yoda's saying that it's too late to train him, and then when he's getting his force powers and can see beyond himself, he sees the immediate danger that other people are in, and he only sees the immediate danger. He doesn't see the big picture. And Yoda's saying, "Don't go rushing off. You're just seeing a possible future, and if you get involved, you're going to manifest it and make that happen." That's basically what he's trying to say. But what he's really saying is, like, you're too old to train as a Jedi. You're already, you're too impulsive. You're too reckless. And the Jedi has to be detached. You have to train that into them from a very young age, to not be attached to other people, because you're going to fall into this trap every time of fear, and fear leads you to the dark side.
One of the interesting things, though, even though that is the message that you certainly get in the second movie, The Empire Strikes Back, you also discover that Yoda and Obi-Wan are wrong.
Mm.
Mm.
They are very much wrong. They have been so steeped in their tradition that they have lost their way, and I guess Luke is sort of the indication that just whatever process that they have decided to adopt over the many hundreds of thousands of years, or whatever the heck it was, has actually brought them to a point where they're too absolute. They are actually a little bit too dogmatic, like the Sith are, and this is where Luke is sort of an indication of well, actually, it doesn't always work this way. There are exceptions to the rule. Thank you very much. And he certainly makes his share of mistakes and continues to do so. So let's keep going.
Yeah.
I think
Also, in the
one
original
thing,
movies, we don't have midichlorians, and the Force is a religion. Kind of, it's more of a mystical force.
Yeah.
So it's not explained what it is really.
one thing before we move on from this film, one thing we didn't really discuss and we've just kind of glazed over is the twist, the reveal that Vader is his father. That was huge. And was that spoiled before you saw the film? Did you guys see that without knowing?
No, I never knew. I I think one of the things that was weird is I remember that scene in Star Wars, the first movie, where Ben is explaining that his father had been a Jedi and he had been killed by Darth Vader, and he never really explained how. He just explained that Darth Vader had turned to the dark side. He had also been a Jedi, and so he was obviously laying the ground there, but it was not obvious when that happened that he was actually his father.
That's also a reflection of his dogmatic views as well. It's like if you turn to the dark side or turn away from the dogma of the Jedi, you're literally dead to me. Like you're literally a different person. That's pretty extreme, man.
Yeah.
It's like there's no redemption arc
That's
there.
something that is explored later on in future films and TV shows. Okay. We'll move on. Return of the Jedi, 1983. This one was directed by Richard Marquardt. I think I'm saying that right. Redemption and conclusion. So with Luke confronting Vader and the Empire, redeeming his father and bringing balance back to the Force. We got introduced to the Ewoks and Endor, Jabba the Hutt and Tatooine. We kind of expanded on that criminal underworld of the galaxy as well, with the rescue of Han Solo. We got the emotional resolution and a final battle, an epic final battle.
We also got, we're a bit older now, so we got Princess Leia in a bikini.
Yep.
So you know why that was. George knew that the audience for Star Wars was getting a bit older, and and knew that they were no longer kids and they were more teenagers, and so he decided that it's time to adult up Princess Leia, but he also didn't want to make Princess Leia like just the sex symbol. So that's why Princess Leia is the one who screws over Jabba the Hutt and kills him. Fairly efficiently and quickly, actually.
I mean, she was kick-ass right from the get-go. It was like, you're a bit short for a stormtrooper, and it's like, who's going to get us? And then she shoots the grate and says, get in, sort of thing, you know? And, she was pretty kick-ass.
She's great. Carrie Fisher. She's so funny as well. She was. I mean, we got Ewoks for the kids and bikinis for the boys.
So Ewoks weren't the first choice. Ewoks weren't the first choice. It was originally planned to be a planet, basically Kashyyyk, in the planet of the Wookiees. But of course, we couldn't afford, I guess, or maybe, I don't know. I don't know how it came about, but we ended up with an army of little people in teddy bear suits.
I do actually know. I know that story. I know why. Why.
Yeah, great.
Yeah. So what had happened is George had already established in the first and second movie that the Wookiee were quite advanced because Chewbacca, a major key character, right, was co-pilot to a ship could pilot the
Yeah.
thing himself. So he didn't really see them as being primitives, and he wanted a primitive species to overthrow a more advanced empire, and he couldn't do that with the Wookiee because clearly they had some advanced technology. I mean, Chewbacca walked around with a crossbow that shot lightning out of it, or laser
God, the
bolts.
bowcaster was a hell of a weapon. And we
Yeah.
only get to see that later on where Han Solo finally fires the thing and he's like, man, I want to get one of these. This is fantastic.
Yeah.
But yeah,
So-
it was also a great excuse to show like those log traps and rolling logs and all that guerrilla warfare stuff. And of course, the speeder bikes. I was so inspired by the speeder bike stuff that in my art class in school, I did an entire comic book chase scene and drew it all, which the
It
teacher
was the
said that
first toy
I was a waste of my time.
Yeah, I had the speeder bike toy. I loved it. That's why it's in my Oasis as I'm rocking around water deep on a speeder bike.
Yeah. Unfortunately, my only bit of Star Wars memorabilia was a sticker on the side of my bed, which was the blue keyboard playing artist guy from Jabba the Hutt's palace.
Oh, Max Rebo?
Yeah. I'm so amazed, you know that. Yeah.
Oh,
that was
yeah,
it. That was all. That was all.
I
the little
got
poor
this
farm kid could have a sticker.
I ruined this film for myself. So the comic book came out for me before I saw the film. So I was at the newsagent and I saw the official comic book adaptation of Return of the Jedi before I saw the film, and I read it in the newsagent and completely, I spoiled it for myself. So I knew all the answers and everything, which
Your brains must have hated you.
No self-control. No, I wasn't a dick.
You did? I know. Okay.
Nah, I was smug about it, but I didn't ruin it. I've never been a dick like that my whole life. I've always been polite. But yeah, I do. I had no self-control. I couldn't help myself.
I was the opposite of that for the Lord of the Rings movie. I'd read the first two books, but I just petered out on the Two Towers because it was just so monotonous to read through that. That I never read the Return of the King, and then when the movies came out, I didn't know how it ended. So we're going and watching the first two movies. We're like, oh yeah, I see where they're going. Yeah, this is good. I remember this. And then the last movie was just like, I have no idea what happens. Nobody tell me. I got to see it fresh. It was great, fantastic. Yeah. Couldn't have done better.
I think for me, Return of the Jedi, it felt like forever after Empire Strikes Back. It really did.
It's only 3 years.
Yeah, dude. Like I said, 3 years feels like a lifetime when you're a kid, and even a teenager. It's even worse.
It's
like 1 year in teenage times is like 7 years. It's like dog years, basically, for a teenager, right? But Return of the Jedi promised like the finish of the story, because we were being told before it was released that this was the last one, that George wasn't making any more. We had these strange teddy bear alliance going on, the Imperial trap, and that iconic "It's a trap" from
Akbar.
From Akbar, Emerald Akbar, and then what had to be the most dysfunctional family you could possibly imagine, because not only do we have
that.
Darth Vader is the father and Luke is the son. Suddenly now Leia is the daughter, the sister, and they're like, God, there's some weird things going on here. Because didn't Luke like Leia and?
Yeah, there was a bit of.
I mean, when was Ben going to tell him? When was Ben going to tell him?
Yeah.
By the way, don't hook up with her because she's your sister. I mean, how rare are humans that they're okay with the thoroughbreds? I mean, not putting too polite a spin on it.
But I think also too, I remember after seeing the end of that movie, the sad reality that this was the end, that there was no more Star Wars after this, because
it was 16 years later that we got Phantom Menace. So
yeah.
And George had said on multiple times there were no more Star Wars stories to tell. The story that was worth telling had been told. And it was so frustrating to hear that, because we had to contend with Ewok movies after that. They put out the friggin' Ewok movies. And I'm like, dude, you're making a Star Wars movie about Ewoks. We didn't even want the Ewok. Give us the other stuff.
Caravan of Courage and the Battle of Endor?
Endor, yeah, Battle of Endor,
Yeah.
yeah.
They feel like fever dreams. Those films, like were they real or did I dream them?
Yeah.
And they
Star Wars Christmas special. Oh.
and they weren't well made. You know, the acting wasn't very good in it. The special effects wasn't that good. The story's pretty shite. And
Yeah.
he'd said
Star
that
Wars
was
had
the end
become
of
a
it.
meme at that
That
point.
it was like cruel. It was like, George, you're being cruel to us. And he had said, I remember way back after seeing the first movie, I'm listening on the radio, and he says, I've got 9 movies to make. 9 movies to make after that. The movie came out, it was a big hit. I've got 9 movies to make.
Well, you know
And
why?
this is just one. And my God, everybody was like so excited. And then we got 3 movies and said, no, that's it. I'm done. I'm going to make some Ewok movies. And it was really, really annoying. And what was even more frustrating is we all knew that he could make the movies if he really wanted, because when he made Star Wars, the studio was so didn't feel like it was going to succeed very, very much at all. It was going to make any significant money. It might make a little bit of money, but nothing major. So they signed off all of the merchandise rights to Star Wars to George, and that's how George partly funded the next movies. And he just kept doing that. He had the rights to the merchandise, and then the next movie he had the rights to make Empire, and it just stayed in his control the whole time.
Micromanaged, you could say. Yeah.
Yes, very
I'm
much
not
so.
surprised that the guy burnt himself out quite severely, and I think that's a large part of it too. Is that he was so busy managing industrial ILM and also just LucasArts in general.
Yeah,
it was a corporation in and of itself. So the video games were really good. So I should definitely mention that I played the hell out of X-Wing and those games a lot.
Also, remember 3 years later he made his next film, and it was a flop. Howard the Duck.
Oh God, that's right. And people were like, "How could this have come from the guy who made Star Wars?" Yeah, I remember.
Yeah, and I think that put him on the back burner because I think he wasn't that keen to make anything else after that for a while. So innovations. Let's talk about the innovations of filmmaking in Star Wars, special effects and sound. So Industrial Light and Magic, founded by George Lucas.
The iconic laser sound was made by recording put a microphone up against a wire and hit the wire. And made that laser sound.
Ben Burt, sound innovations. He created entirely new soundscapes, bringing the galaxy to life with iconic sounds like lightsabers, TIE fighters, droids. I mean, you can have those. You can have these noises as like message tones on your phone, and people will just, within 3 seconds, you'll recognize what that is.
Yep. I speak a little bit of Jawa, Didi. And of course the sand people.
Did you know that the TIE fighter scream was made by blending an elephant's bellow with a car driving on wet pavement?
No, I did not know that. They did a very good job with the linguistics on the Ewok language. They took that quite seriously too. Also,
the music.
C-3PO had quite a dialogue in Ewok.
We got John Williams' iconic score.
Yeah,
probably some of the best cinematic music of all time in the Imperial March.
Yes, yes, and then of course you have the end music of the Ewoks champion. Sounded so show tunes. I hated that music. Hated it.
Here's a little personal knowledge for you, which is one of the reasons probably why my wife and I get on so well. I got married to the Imperial March.
Wow. Dun, 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 dun. Yeah, I can see it.
Yeah.
Dun, 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 dun,
Yeah.
dun, dun, dun. Yeah.
The problem is with getting married to the Imperial March. It seems like it's very fitting, and you're as long as you're thinking about that music, and it's the final scene of Star Wars where they're going to get the medals at the end from the princess. You're all good.
Everyone but Chewie gets a medal though.
Yeah. Chewie doesn't get one because apparently he wasn't even part of this. But
where are you going to pin it?
There's a pet.
Where are you going to pin it on him? A nipple?
It's considered a pet.
He's got that thing down the front of bandana or whatever it is.
For all we know, his entire front is nipple. We don't know.
No, he's got a bandolier. He can just hang it off the bandolier. but that
If you, hey, well, just anyone just Google shaved Wookiee. Yeah.
Oh God, no. Now you know what you've done to me, and now I've got when when Darth Vader and the Emperor are walking down for the Death Star inspection. And by the way, that's a matte painted scene, so all those troopers in there are painted in. They're not actually real troopers. It's a composite drawing. Now forevermore, that's going to be them walking down there to da, 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 da. Thanks to you, Nacho. Thank you
yeah.
very much.
But I mean,
Damaged my brain
that music
forever.
could also be, walking down the aisle to a coffin to be buried. I
Yeah.
mean, that music could go either way. So,
Marriage can sometimes be viewed as a funeral.
Yeah.
anyway,
Uh, um, yeah, industrial light and magic. Obviously, let's talk about miniatures and models.
Mhm.
Everything that is something I really, really miss now. Is
Practical
sort
effects.
of practical effects. Yeah, and it's something when we get to the remastered, it's something that I think George shitted all over later on as well. Just
Yeah.
he
There was
he
nothing wrong
was
with
the innovator.
the first big furry banthas. There was nothing wrong with them, and also the Tauntaun running across the surface of Hoth. That was a really great
Hmm.
scene. Although it was a bit stilted, because it was stop motion and stuff. There was nothing wrong with it.
Yeah, like the use
And
of matte
the
paintings,
sound that
blue screen technology. Yeah,
there was so
that
many technologies that
that
came out.
trench
I've
run.
got a list of all the technologies that apparently Industrial Light and Magic spearheaded in terms of there being the standard of creating new technology and excellence in film special effects. And it was highly detailed miniatures, often made from kit bashing, but quite often from scratch by literally carving out the pieces. A lot of
Mm.
balsa wood, but a heck of a lot of plyboard was used, and digital effects combining images and putting them across, on top of each other and interlaying them and so forth. Matte painting had been around for a long time, but the sheer um, uh, quality of the matte painting that you see in Star Wars is another step ahead. The moving camera trolley that AJ was talking about, that wasn't just moving it away from something like a spaceship and so forth, but was later carried on to moving the camera around on a track for filming Empire and Return of the Jedi. Creature animations done with automated gears and so forth. Advanced stop motion, there's been stop motion before, but they really took it to another level. And then what was called Go Motion, that was used, I believe, in Return of the Jedi. This was the first development of Go Motion, which is a different type of sort of stop motion, a little bit more advanced. It's a lot.
Mm. Yeah, and the blue screen. Did you say blue screen?
You did.
Yeah, so which
Green.
would later become the green screen.
Yeah.
Which is
the
inserting
Rancor
actors
was
into.
an absolute fantastic sequence, and also like the Rancor's keeper when he saw the Rancor had been killed was like, that was so. There's a whole book that was just short stories set in Jabba's palace around the time when Luke was there, and one of the stories was the Banthor, the Rancor and its keeper. Kind of fascinating, but yeah.
I was watching the Rancor special effects, and it's a puppet with rods that activate it, and basically somebody's hand shoved up its ass into its head, so you could move the mouth around, because they were running the camera so fast. I think they were at 100 frames, which is far faster than a normal camera, which is usually just 24 frames,
Yep.
and so they had to do all the motions with the little puppet really fast and film it because they had to all be slowed down later on.
Because that gives it a really ponderous and heavy feel to it. When you've got a high-speed camera and you're recording like somebody moving something like that, they have that, like it's got a lot of momentum.
It's almost like the complete opposite of what we were saying about Doctor Who's special effects last week or the other week. Frank Oz as well. We didn't really mention him. He was involved.
Mhm.
big connection with Henson. Fozzie Bear,
Mhm.
Yoda. I don't know, was Henson involved with the puppet side of Star Wars?
I don't
Well,
believe so.
yeah.
I don't believe
I think
so directly. I think a lot of the people who worked over there were borrowed in between jobs. So a lot of the people who were puppeteers over there for Jim Henson were sort of put on, I guess, lease or whatever for tasks. But
I can
I don't
hear
remember that.
AJ googling away in the
Yeah,
background.
he's googling away. Of course he is. Yeah. I guess another thing that needs to be said about the special effects and the world building that was done with the special effects is you see a world that is used. Star Wars, things
Mm.
feel dirty and used and dented and scraped. Machines are dirty and scraped and damaged, and there's laser marks on them quite often. The world of Star Wars is not a pristine place. A lot of the scenes where you do see anything with vehicles or starships, that's fast moving and edited with fast shots from one thing to the other, so it makes it feel like it's taking place at high speed. So you didn't really have a lot of science fiction that did, a lot of fast cuts back and forth, things moving through the sun, this shot really quickly, and fast transactions. You notice a big difference if you look at the original Star Wars movie and then Empire Strikes Back and how the ships moved. There's a quantum leap, right? You can see the huge difference in the technology from that point of view, from those scenes, in terms of how
Yeah.
spaceships move. And of course, Star Wars space scenes haven't quite transitioned over as well as they might have, because it's been so long and it's an old movie. But I think one of the things that you do feel is there's definitely feels like there's more weight. I don't know how else to describe it. I feel like
Mm.
Star Wars, even though it feels a little less well put together because it's older technology compared to what Empire Strikes Back did and Return of the Jedi, I do feel like the ships have more weight compared to the newer stuff, where they started to take out the modeling and started to bring in digital models instead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the story is that Jim Henson and George Lucas were always good friends, and they were deeply involved into the production. And Jim was going to play Yoda, but his schedule was too, like, you got to understand that Jim Henson worked 7 days a week. He had like one day off on Sunday where he basically collapsed into a heap, and he eventually worked himself to death and died of pneumonia. So he was a workaholic, and he was really, really busy all the time. And so he suggested that Frank Oz do the role of Yoda, and Lucas actually pushed to try and get Frank Oz an Oscar for his performance. Yeah, but so Jim
Oh, it's
basically
iconic.
would have been involved, but he was just too busy.
Well, let's move it. Let's move into the characters. So,
Yep.
classic archetypes. Luke Skywalker, he's the hero's journey. He embodied the classic hero archetype. Transitions from a humble farm boy to the savior of the galaxy through trials and adventures. Han Solo, he was the reluctant hero. Starts off as a smuggler, driven by self-interest, kind of evolves into the anti-hero to committed leader of the rebels. Princess Leia, she was always she defies the damsel in distress trope,
Mhm.
and kind of comes more across as a strong leader, embodies the warrior princess archetype, symbolizing strength and independence for women in cinema. Darth Vader, he's the fallen hero, represents the fallen hero and dark father figure. A tragic arc moves from Jedi to the enforcer of the Empire, accumulating into his redemption through his son. Both Obi-Wan and Yoda are sort of meant to take on the wise mentor, serving as the sort of classic mentor figure guiding Luke through his hero's journey. And then we've got the Empire as the ultimate villain, who's just the archetypical archlord, acts as the basically the evil of the thing, and I guess droids as sidekicks and storytellers. R2D2 and C3PO are kind of there as the comic relief and key storytellers, providing us with a different perspective on the events.
We've
And
also
kind of
got
fulfilled that role.
Uncle Owen, who was saying to Luke, just stay with me for another season. We need you here on the farm for real, real life shit,
Mhm.
not just we need you for another because we haven't got the droids and stuff, and you got to blah blah. Just one more harvest, and he'll be like, "But I want to go off and join the Empire, like my friends." So he was
didn't want to join
not
the
anti.
Empire. He's not trying to. He wanted to fight the Empire.
No, that was training at the academy.
No.
Essentially,
He wanted to fight the Empire. He wanted to go off and get training. He wanted to join the rebellion. He was not
Mm.
trying to join the Empire.
He wanted to be a pilot, a space
Yes, he
pilot.
did. He wanted to go and become a pilot, but he had no intentions of joining
Well,
the
we
Empire.
know that his best mate Wedge. So him and Wedge were friends back on Tatooine. So they had that relationship, and then when they met back up in the rebellion, Wedge was just as famous a pilot. Well, he was the more famous pilot.
A lot of that stuff, I think, was cut out of the Wedge scenes and stuff. Yeah, I mean, I guess
so essentially
to me,
he was stuck
Uncle
at home.
Owen,
His friends had already gone off, and he was just like teenager rebellion. And then of course he probably
I take away Uncle Owen as that kind of don't follow your dreams, stay at home and do a practical job type figure.
And he would have stayed at home if it wasn't for the extreme action, or the extreme violence of the Empire in killing his aunt and uncle for no reason at all. And so that was that senseless brutality that cut all ties and created the fanatical murderer, the rebel destroyer of their civilization out of Luke Skywalker. So it was the seeds of their own downfall was the evil actions of the Empire.
Don't buy stolen shit off dodgy people in the desert, mate.
Well, don't buy used droids. Don't buy used droids, Elon. Did you see the new taxi and van and the robots, the Optimus robots that Elon just unveiled?
No.
Oh, you guys don't follow. You guys don't.
No, I don't care.
Let's not dive into Elon Musk.
Yeah. Stick with Star Wars.
I'm just talking about droids, man.
Yeah, droids. I guess, were there any other things? Because there's a couple of things that I noticed.
No, you go.
So, I think the Empire represents the individual's fight against the system, and how the system itself, no matter how big it is and how much it says it is for the benefit of all, that fight that people have, the decision whether they go with it or they don't, it sort of represents that. Then you have the lightsaber, which is weird because it's literally, if you look at sort of the mythology and the fantasy that is presented, legend and mythology, there's usually a magical weapon, and the lightsaber is basically a specialized magical weapon that Luke Skywalker requires to be able to achieve his goals in this story. It glows. It's literally a magical weapon, and it, of course, requires training, like all things tend to do. So that, I think that's what the lightsaber represents, is the magic weapon from literally every traditional mythical
It's the Excalibur of his films.
It's basically Excalibur or whatever other weapon you can think of. Then you have the Force, which is that magical, spiritual, psychological edge.
Scientology.
I know.
Soundtrack.
Actually, let's not get AJ onto Scientology.
Yeah. No, but it's basically the Force is sort of that representation of magic and spiritual and the psychological edge that Lucas needs to learn to be able to take on his journey in the first place. But also the Force is kind of that dichotomy that the spirit can defeat technology, right? Because you get those themes constantly, that the Force is far more powerful than all the technology, including the Death Star, that is apparently the most powerful thing in the galaxy. It is even more powerful than the Death Star. It's just
the shamanistic principle of animism, so that all aspects of the universe are alive in some respect, and you can communicate with it and move it. Faith.
Do you think there was some sort of reaction as well to what was going on in the world at the time? So Vietnam War, about recruitment.
Certainly in the first movie with, as I say, Luke having that compulsion to go and join his friends on in the fight, and his father saying, "Stay at home, don't go." But there wasn't the draft. I mean, they could have very heavily leaned into the Empire drafting young men, and Luke trying to avoid it. Kind of like Dragon Slayer, how sacrifice the maiden, and so one of them dresses as a man. That would have been funny. Luke starts off as a girl. It's like, oh.
Or he starts off as a boy, and then you find out he is actually a girl.
Would have made the relationship with Princess Leia more interesting.
Yeah, we'll get to woke Star Wars when we get to the.
Also, there was the let's not forget when he first goes to that bar in Tatooine and Mos Eisley. You'll never find a more wretched hive of scum and villainy. Had to get that in there. The droids weren't allowed in, so droids are the prejudice is against droids. So they're the new, the new outcast, bottom rung of society, and only now we're sort of leaning into that with sort of droid rights and peace with the latest series and stuff. But it was there right from the very beginning. And
I guess
we don't allow that.
C-3PO was he was a translator, and R2-D2 was. I always think they're like a Swiss Army knife, aren't they? They're kind of like a maintenance droid that just fixes things.
Yeah, he's an astromech, so he's a navigational and repair droid.
So,
and they were essentially tools or slaves to their masters. Remember, there was always, there's always the reference of, but he's your master. You have to do what you're told. And the restraining bolt. Another thing that we can't forget, particularly it tends to happen in all the movies, but the first one, you have the belly of the whale. The journey for the traditional hero's journey is the journey into the belly of the whale, and the trash compactor is represented in Star Wars by that. And then I would say in Empire Strikes Back, the belly of the whale is represented by being inside the space worm for Han Solo and the rest of the crew, right?
Yeah.
Luke's already been in the belly of the whale and got through
that. The droids do too, because they get captured by the Jawas and end up in the scrap heap with all the other things. I also love the box droid, which is basically a recharging battery. It's a recharging unit. It's basically a gas pump.
Power droid.
I love that.
And then we can't forget the other thing, that constant play that we get told right throughout it, which is always playing through mythology, and that is the fight and the battle between good and evil, the light and the dark, and how people have to make that choice to decide which they're going to embrace and which they're going to
hell, the Jawas are even like the mystical dwarves who have the magical items, because the droids that they sell have contained the entire mystical story that carries Luke out into the galaxy. You were in the Clone Wars? I've been in space battles.
The Sand People are like the Taliban.
You've got a secret message from the princess? Matter of fact, I do. It's not good.
The other sort of story or archetype or theme that you get is a very strong theme around the transition, particularly in Star Wars, from the child to the adult, that development. They're having to let go of childish things and take on the adult role, and Luke Skywalker has to do that. And I think this is one of the reasons why it appealed so much to people, is it was so clear that Luke was a child. He might have been a teenager, but he really was just a child running around in an adult's body, trying to make adult decisions and not really fully understanding everything that's going on.
He's so whiny in the first film. He's so whiny. He complains about everything.
No way in hell I would have handed him a loaded lightsaber.
Yeah.
It's like, by the way, don't point that at you.
Don't point at your face.
You went the same way as your father.
Yeah.
I can't
That's
see.
how your father lost his hand.
Yeah. And
by the way, don't drop it point down.
Yeah. One of the most
anything else on characters?
Yeah, I think one of the most common stories you see in mythology is that jump from the child to the adult, and the and transitioning from those two things, and then from the adult to the next stage. which we're going to have to deal with later on as the next couple of movies come along.
Well, should we talk about the cultural impact of Star Wars?
Oh God!
Because it was yes, this will probably take a while. Merchandising revolution. George Lucas sold the merchandising rights to Kenner for $100,000, earning 5 cents for every dollar sold, alongside a minimum royalty of $10,000. The deal led to Star Wars becoming the most successful merchandising franchise ever, earning a Guinness World Record for unprecedented revenue. So released in 1977, Star Wars grossed $410 million initially and made $775 million on its subsequent release. Between 1977 and 1978, the Star Wars toys generated $100 million in sales for Kenner for their $100,000 investment. 35 years later, Star Wars themed toys have generated $12 billion in revenue, licensed toys producing around $3 billion annually. Kenner is now part of Hasbro. We love Hasbro here.
I mean, that's why we had droid armies and all those droid toys and stuff, because fantastic for
the packaging.
For
just the packaging. I think you can't describe what it was like. Those toys were like for us as kids. They were premium. A must-have item.
Yeah.
Just everything, like the way they were packaged.
That we had around then, Smurfs, the Smurf toys.
Oh, no, that was later on. That was the 80s.
Maybe Transformers.
G.I. Joe. It was Barbie for girls, G.I. Joe for boys. Maybe $6 Million Man, I think, had some stuff around that.
No, it was Action Man during the Vietnam War, remember, because Hasbro didn't want to be associated with an unpopular war.
Yeah, Action Man.
Shift with the political climate.
Yeah. But I remember. Also, sorry,
it was clever because we got to learn the names of all the side characters from the film as well. Like, it was a clever way for us to learn the lore on our own without sort of reading and stuff. So that's the reason that's the reason I know Max Rebo is the name of the guy in that band or that particular robot droid, or because I didn't. That was the toy I didn't get Luke Skywalker. I got some shitty droid that makes a 2-second appearance in the film.
And of course the phenomenon of Boba Fett. Boba Fett was incredibly popular. I mean, we basically had nothing to go on with Boba Fett. Just like he was this helmeted, mysterious, Han Solo had heard of him. He said, Boba Fett? He was this mysterious bounty hunter that we knew nothing about. And his appeal was that he was unknown. He's just a mysterious guy. And he wasn't Darth Vader. He's not a clear bad guy, but he was obviously pretty damn scary.
I remember the merchandising around this was nuts because, it's not like I came from a rich family or anything like that. And there was chewing gum, Star Wars chewing gum. There was stickers. There was lunch boxes. There was everything you could possibly imagine. There were bags. You had the toys, and there was literally a toy for everything. But the figures in particular, and of course the 3 major stars of Star Wars, Luke, Leia, and Han Solo, you could never get them. They were always the first to go, gone. So this is why in my family I didn't get that many of those. My brother got them. They used to buy them for my brother Sam all the time, and he had like every other character other than those 3 key characters because you just couldn't buy Luke, Leia, and Han. They just went off the shelf so fast. And then of course people would go in and like, well, do they really want to have this? Well, that's all there is. So you wound up with all of these side characters or background characters that didn't have a lot of information on. You wind up with them in your toy collection rather than the 3 ones that you wanted.
Yeah, I ended up with a Star Wars character with it was a stormtrooper, and I think there was an R2-D2. And those were toys that some other kid had. And as I say, I just had a sticker on the side of my bed. That was my one bit of Star Wars merch.
Yeah, stormtroopers were hard to get too. They were hard.
Yeah, they were cool.
I would have killed for a Boba Fett.
I actually had quite a few. I was quite lucky. I had a older sister, 15 years older, that spoilt the shit out of me. So I
Oh,
had
I
a
did
pretty
have
good
an
collection.
album. I did have the soundtrack, the Star Trek thing. Audio, like albums, LPs for movies and stuff were a much bigger thing back then,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
for
because you
sure.
couldn't get the DVD or the
No,
no, yeah. I've still got my record. I used to listen to it all the time.
mm,
Yeah, um,
that's really good.
yeah. The toys were just they just were everywhere, and they're still even that packaging is iconic to me. When you see that kind of packaging, sort of. I guess other things, it was a cultural touchstone. It was just a global phenomenon. Iconic quotes. People, I still probably quote Star Wars on a daily.
My cat's favorite toy is an Ewok.
um,
It's true.
and we got all these other films that were clearly inspired. It just did this. We were bombarded by science fiction in the 80s.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, the next big thing I remember seeing was E.T. E.T. was the
Battlestar
next thing that
Galactica.
blew. Oh, yeah.
My gosh, we're going to talk about Battlestar Galactica sometime. But yeah,
Yes,
Battlestar
yes, we do.
Galactica was definitely the studios going bananas and thinking they could make a TV series with a high budget, with special effects, and that would be a good idea
And they almost
financially.
made it too if it wasn't for that ridiculous ending.
Yeah.
The ridiculous ending of Battlestar Galactica.
The remake.
The remake.
Yeah.
The second one. Oh God, yeah. Well, the second one should never have happened. But anyway,
Oh well, it did give us Tricia hatful.
but I think there was three. There was the original Battlestar Galactica. Then they had the Battlestar Galactica 1980, and then they had the next one after that was a mini series, and then
Flying bikes.
turned
Yeah, the
into a
chips.
series.
The chips Battlestar Galactica. I love that.
Yeah,
People
but
don't realize how popular chips was.
yeah. Chips was pretty popular. The other thing I think that sort of stood out for me was just how crazy people were at school about Star Wars. Because I remember standing in the playground one day, and Grant comes over to me and he says, "How many times have you seen Star Wars?" And I said, "I've seen it once." And he said, "You've only seen it once." And he'd seen it 12 times. And then somebody else walked over and they're talking about how many times I'd seen Star Wars. And of course, they'd seen it like 10 times or 11 times. And I'm like, "Yeah, we're going to go back again." And you're like, "You seriously? Why would you want to go back and watch it again?" I mean, I loved the movie. It was great. But why would you go back and watch it 12 times? And
What are
it's
you,
still
stupid? Did you not get it the first time?
did you not? Yeah. Were you not paying attention? Yeah. So that's how mad it was. And all my friends were like this, apart from those who were a bit poorer and could not afford to keep going back to the movies all the time. It was such a simple story. It was something that we'd never seen before. It was a crazy time because people were absolutely bananas. It broke every record under the sun. It made studio execs and studio
Everyone wanted their Star Wars.
yeah,
Everyone wanted a Star Wars thing.
every CEO in
Um,
a
I
studio
think
just got a hard
Dis,
on for Star Wars at that
yeah,
point.
Disney. What did they pump out? Black Hole shortly
Yeah.
after.
Oh, that
Um,
was not it.
um, yeah,
It
Battlestar Galactica appeared on TV. Buck Rogers made a comeback,
yeah.
which is Lorraine Williams owned the rights to that from
Uh,
Dungeons and Dragons.
yeah.
$6 Million Man.
Yeah, D&D
Incredible
actually
Hulk.
made stuff like Gamma World and Star Frontiers off the backbone of that. It had an effect on role-playing games. Everything. Sci-fi became, I guess, cool, or just consider a bit like, I guess, what Marvel has now done with superheroes.
Yeah.
It just was everywhere. We just, all of a sudden, we had no sci-fi, and then we were inundated with sci-fi.
But it wasn't great sci-fi. It wasn't it didn't have that.
It was hit and miss. It was
It
hit and
didn't it
miss.
was very, very hit and miss. Like some of it didn't, like most of those series didn't go on for
Yeah.
more than one or two seasons, and then they would stop and you'd move on to something else. But it was really interesting too how when I think about the movies that I've watched over the years, this is probably the
Yeah.
greatest movie in my childhood was Star Wars, the very first one out of all of them. I
Yeah.
can't think of another movie that was that had such an impact at school and in my life. And I mean, it's not like I don't like, I love other movies. I do. But I also remember how crazy, when I was talking about how George on the radio in a talk show saying he was going to do 9 movies after the success of the first
Yeah.
one. And I was excited. My brother was excited. My grandmother thought it was nuts because nobody does that. And the
Yeah.
rest of the filmmaking industry, the whole world was like, this filmmaker's crazy. Like, you
My
can't
first
claim
thought
to
when I
be able
heard
to
that
do
was
that.
like, oh, the first
Yeah.
ones must have been shit.
Yeah,
They skipped
yeah,
over
yeah,
them.
yeah.
So here's some sci-fi films that came out. Battle Beyond the Stars.
Yes, that's the Seven Samurai and Sci-Fi.
Flash Gordon came out. They decided to make Flash. I love Flash Gordon.
Oh yeah,
I could.
there's nothing else quite like it.
It's a terrible movie, but it's fun.
Yeah. Escape from New York, I guess, somewhat. Heavy Metal. Sorry, I'm just reading through a list now. Outland, Sean Connery. I don't know if you've seen that one.
I've
Yeah,
heard of it and watched bits of it. It's not a good movie. Yeah. No.
That's
Blade
great.
Runner.
Blade Runner. I never really got into it. My brother loved that movie, but I never really liked Blade Runner that much.
Even Star
Did you
Trek.
watch it at the time, or did you watch it
I did.
recently?
I know. I could never get
It
into
is
it.
a very dystopian version of the
Yeah.
future, but I mean, it's pretty on point.
I think Star Trek took influence. I think Wrath of Khan is influenced by Star Wars. It got a lot more action focused. Tron.
Oh God,
probably another film that was probably influenced by Star Wars a fair bit. Kroll, which we've mentioned.
Yep.
The
Last Starfighter.
Yeah, Twilight Zone, the movie.
Oh God, my brother couldn't even sit through that thing. Pussy he was.
June, that my brother took me to, making me think I was going to watch the next Star Wars.
Mate, June had a massive pivotal effect on my life, that's for sure.
The Ice
But that's
Pirates.
quite separate.
I remember that.
That's a terrible movie, but it's so much fun to watch.
Yeah.
Runaway
Dark
with
Side,
Tom
Dark
Selleck.
Side.
Yes. Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess you could probably even argue films like Back to the Future, The Terminator, I don't know, Enemy Mine, Explorers.
Yes.
Yeah,
a lot of people wouldn't even remember that Explorers even existed. Yeah.
Yep.
Flight of the Navigator and Explorers were very similar in their sort of feel.
Yeah.
I just hunted down and rewatched Explorers.
Invaders from Mars.
River Phoenix and yeah.
No, Invaders. Now, the problem with Invaders of Mars is Invaders of Mars was made far sooner. It was in the 1950s or 1960s. I can't remember. Somewhere around there. There was a very, very early version. So it was well before Star Wars. They might have remade it, and they've remade it a few times. But yeah, it had been. It was already out there.
Invasion of the Body Snatchers.
Yes. Yeah, we had to have Spaceballs. Yeah. Yeah, we're going to jam the signal. And then they poured jam all over the screen.
Yeah, so we got inundated with and that's just movies, TV shows as well. So we were inundated with sci-fi. It was a good time. Sci-fi and horror was massive in the 80s. Political influence.
Jedi has become a religion, and and we grew up truly believing that if we just knew the right way to think, we could move things with our minds.
One thing I do want to talk about, because I'm going to fit it into this time zone, even though it didn't come out till 97, is the 501st Legion, formed by Albin Johnson and Tom Cruise in 1987, the largest imperial costume organization globally. It's basically they promote charitable events for kids' hospitals and stuff like that. So just lots and lots of love for this and a great sense of community. I think until we got things like internet chat rooms, Star Wars fans were quite civil to each other and quite polite.
So your friend, just to make it clear for those of you who missed what Nacho was saying here, he did not say Star Wars fans. He said Star Wars fiends, as in demons and devils. Okay, if you're one of those, My gosh.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
if
Back in
you
the
are
day,
a
you were either a Star
fan,
Wars fan or a Star Trek fan, but you couldn't be both.
yeah.
Oh yeah, I guess there was a bit of that, wasn't there? Like there was
There was.
you into
It was
Star
a
Wars
thing.
or Star Trek.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
there were plenty of us who loved Star Wars and Star Trek,
Mm.
Yeah,
and
yeah,
I'm
definitely.
one, so I can't be the only one. I'm
I mean,
sure
I
there
was
are.
raised on a bookshelf of classic pulp science fiction, and I was born into the era of Star Trek and Star Wars and sci-fi and fantasy.
Okay,
So I've been raised on this from the get-go. I was destined to do what I do.
my dad was a Star Trek fan, so I watched it with him. So it reminds me a lot of my dad. But that first Star Trek film was terrible. My God, that was a snorefest. But
It's good music though.
uh,
Well, it did what it did what science fiction movies do, right? You know, like Space Odyssey, Star Trek, the motion picture, is you have all the
mm,
special effects that you want to show off, and you spend a lot of time slowly panning through so that nobody misses anything, and you see the whole
Yeah.
thing, which is not what
Also, there was
Star
that
Wars did.
whole like people who missed the series finally had the movie, so that was just a nostalgia kick for them. So they just wanted their characters on screen as much as possible. So it was all about
yeah,
Spock and McCoy and all that stuff, and everything
but
else
yeah,
was a background thing.
Wrath
So
of
yeah,
Khan,
Wrath
awesome
of
film.
Khan. Yeah, yeah.
Anyway, anything else before we move on to the special editions?
Oh, let's do the special editions.
Okay. So in 1997, George Lucas released the special editions of the original Star Wars, making both minor and major changes to align the films more to his original vision. While many fans were initially dazzled by the updated visual effects, opinions have since become more mixed, with some changes celebrated, others criticised, and a few regarded as downright unwelcome. I've divided this into what I call the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Yeah.
Um,
Can I
see
just
if we
say
agree.
a little thing about how fans and over time how things get viewed? I'm amazed at people's view of Star Wars, The Empire Strikes Back, The Return of the Jedi. The view that I felt at the time when those were released, and then the view that starts to show up after, and then you start looking at the remastered movies, and people's opinion
Mm,
at the time had then changed over time. And I've come to the conclusion that it's all just bullshit, frankly,
yeah.
because the question always comes down to, as you go through this list of the good, bad, and the ugly, it comes down to the question of, should George Lucas have remastered the movies, right?
Yeah.
That's the key question.
Yeah.
And George has been adamant that the creator of a movie, when it is their movie and they have the rights to it, and the director's vision is something that they have the right to make changes to the movie. And I don't disagree with George about that at all. I totally get it. What upsets me, though, is that some of the changes did not feel like they were an improvement to all the movies. There's very little that really changed in
Yeah.
the first two movies. The Star Wars movie had so much stuff added, but you cannot get an original copy of that
This,
without
yeah.
pirating it now. Do you know what I mean?
I,
And that's
I've got an
that's the most
original.
upsetting thing, is trying to get an original print, or either on DVD, Blu-ray, or 4K. You can't get the original movie without just having a
Yeah.
pirated version taken off YouTube or the internet somewhere. And
So
it's
when he
a shame.
first released the special editions on DVD, um, just before just before the prequels came out, he released a limited 2-disc version,
Mm.
and on the second disc it had the original theatrical cuts. And I managed to get those. I had to drive around, like, because this is before the internet. You could shop on the internet. I had to drive from. I was in Perth, and I had to drive all around town to just find these 2-disc editions so I could have the original theatrical. So I agree as well. I think there is an argument that, once you release something, it's no longer yours. It's out there. It's art. And I don't know if you can. I don't know if it is right to mess with it. I think it's, I know things date, but things are
Mm.
of the time. I mean, we'll argue now that these effects that he's added have now dated.
Mm.
So does he go back and correct it a third time? He can't, because he doesn't own it anymore. But yeah, the
Probably
fact
will.
that they don't make it available is the thing I bug in. You should be able to choose what version you want to watch. The
Yeah.
fact that he has taken away our ability to make a choice, and now we are forced to watch this version, and that's not my version. That's not the version I grew up on, and that's not the version I love. And all my opinions from before are based on those original versions.
Yeah.
And a lot of we'll go through as we go through the good, bad, and the ugly.
Yeah.
But
this was just I just wanted to address that question about whether a creator who owns the property has the right to change it, and these they do, but it's always nice to have the original vision protected as well.
Anyway, all right. So the good enhancements and improvements. So he did improve some visual effects. I feel the airspeeder cockpit changed from a translucent opaque to a more realistic appearance. He put eyelids on the Ewoks. The Death Star destruction. He had more enhanced explosions during the Death Star. He expanded the environments of places like Mos Eisley and Cloud City, so they seemed more on par, I guess, with the environments that he had during.
Yeah, he was never happy with
prequels.
the amount of aliens in Mos Eisley.
Yep. Character continuity. He put Ian McDiarmid in as the Empire, replacing the original actor to sort of line up with the prequels. He added background members to the Jedi Council from the Revenge of the Sith. He expanded the celebration at the end of the film. So at the end of Jedi, it was just all on Endor, but now he showed it all, around different galaxies on, Naboo and other planets. Sort of
also included the conversation between Jabba the Hutt and Han Solo when Han was offering to pay off his debt.
Oh, we'll get to that. So that's what I feel is good. The bad, which I think I'd classify as unnecessary additions. The Jabba the Hutt scene. No need for it. The inclusion of Jabba the Hutt, where Han meets Jabba, just giving more exposition, which was already covered in the Greedo scene. We didn't need it. CGI updates.
A younger Jabba being more mobile and less some slug.
I like the idea of this guy being mentioned in the first film and then finally seeing him in the third film. There's a payoff there for me. I think revealing him too early. CGI updates. He added tentacles and a beak to the Sarlacc pit for some reason. He added more additional effects to the Wampa. That I think it was more suspenseful not showing the creature. And he just added heaps more stormtroopers. Like it was like a cut and paste thing. So you remember that scene where Han on the first Star Wars, where Han opens the door and there's like 3 stormtroopers, and now he opens the door, there's like hundreds of them there for some reason. And then for me, the ugly or the offensively bad changes. Jedi rocks. Fucking hell. You replace the original song with this super CGI heavy musical performance, adding Darth Vader's no. Where Vader yelled no during his redemption, which I guess was to line up with his no from the end of the, what was the last film called? Sorry, in the prequels. I've gone blank there.
Revenge of the Sith.
Yeah. What she screams at the end of that. Chucking in Hayden Christensen as Anakin's Force Ghost in Return of the Jedi. And then the most grievous crime is Greedo shooting first, completely changing Han Solo's introduction from a sort of morally ambiguous anti-hero to, it's just, they're my problems with it.
I never cared who shot first.
Yeah, I could never quite understand people's desire to get too upset with a lot of the changes that he made. The only time that I got really frustrated with what he was doing was in Star Wars, and he had all these droids in Mos Eisley getting in the way of the main characters that they're trying to communicate to the stormtroopers that are on duty, and they're in the background, that are moving in the foreground, that are actually blocking the camera. There was just a bit too much of that at times, and I felt like that detracted from it.
I agree. It moved away from the original, like, for instance, like when Luke is first talking to C-3PO and he's dipping him in the oil bath. No, it was just ordinary. It was like a workshop, And Mos Eisley is a busy spaceport and stuff, but you didn't need all of that distraction in the background, like the thing rearing up and all that sort of stuff. It distracted from, as you say, what was going on. And it was like, you could see them like, oh, we've got to justify putting this effect in here. It's just like, no, we don't need to.
Well, they just add all
It's
these
not, it
comical
shouldn't be
things
drawing our
for
attention.
these comical things for no reason. Like I know George apparently was always really unhappy with the what's the thing Luke drives in the first film, the brown
Speeder.
yeah, the Land Cruiser thing. He was always unhappy with the way that looked, so he tidied that up, which is fair enough, and it looked a lot cooler. But then as he goes past, you see a couple of droids fumbling something, and yeah, it's
So
just unnecessary.
I didn't have a problem with those scenes because there's not dialogue taking place. It's just an establishing shot. A creature rearing up as a speeder goes through into town, some droids doing silly things. But no, when they have a specific scene where there is dialogue between, your stormtroopers and your key characters, and you're blocking it with droids, that's the one thing in the Star Wars movie that pissed me off the most. The rest of it, I actually am fine with. I didn't really have too much, I always thought it was weird that people got upset about whether the Han Solo shot first or Greedo shot first. And my view has always been that they're both highly skilled individuals with a gun, and they're right next to each other.
Who hate each
Whoever
other.
shoots first is the one who wins, and the other one
Yeah.
will die because they're not going to
Yeah.
miss. And so I always thought it was stupid to have Greedo firing when they did the remastering, shooting and just missing Han, and they have Han's head moved just a smidgen, so it's just past his
Oh,
head.
it looked terrible. Yeah, the editing was shockingly bad on that.
Yeah, I think that was unnecessary. I was happy for Han to gun down many individuals, and it wouldn't have changed my view of Han Solo. The Empire Strikes Back changes, I actually think the vast majority of them were a good idea. I know a lot of people don't like the idea of having the creature in the cave, the ice cave, that's eating stuff. I was fine with that. I didn't have an issue with it. I didn't feel like it took away from the movie or destroyed it. And the vast majority of that, I think most of those changes were actually just cleaning up things that were probably obvious to people who are really good at picking out special effects problems and experts in the field. Most of us didn't even friggin' notice. The only other thing with Return of the Jedi, I don't think I minded with almost any of their changes, except for that last scene with the Force ghosts. That's the only thing in that movie that I really like. That's too much. Just don't need to put Christian in there. just have the original image. But but that's the only complaint I had with the remastered stuff.
Yeah, my main
I think
beef
you
is
can
that,
notice. No, you go, AJ. Sorry.
The influence of Jim Henson, like the Dark Crystal, for instance, has got a lot of stuff going on in the full background. It's like all the scenes have to be alive because they wanted to depict this world of Ra as being rich, full of diverse ecosystems and stuff. And you want to empathize with these natural creatures and stuff who later get victimized by the Skeksis. But in Star Wars, of course, you want to concentrate on what's going on with the characters and not have, as you said, all that background stuff going on. Also, it's a problem with like video games and motion capture artists. And I'm looking at you guys. Just because you're paid to move,
AJ, it's really hard to hear you because when you don't face that microphone, we actually hear less. It's quieted already.
Yeah. So motion capture artists, just because you're paid to move, don't move all the frickin' time. Move like a normal person moves. Don't like constantly move around like you do. It's like, I know you want to be artists and everything, but it's not a fucking ballet dance or anything. You just move like a normal person. Go out and smell the roses for once in a while. And the same sort of thing with when you're putting the extra special effects in. Subtle.
It's jarring as well because it's CGI versus original practical effects, and it's noticeable. I can, it looks like it's two different films mashed together to me. You can clearly see the CGI, and you can clearly see what was practical, and it's kind of counterintuitive because Star Wars was of its time. It's 1970, 1980, 1983, and now he's updated it with 1996. And that's now of its time. So even that CGI now has dated. It's just a never-ending cycle of like these things are going to evolve over time and get better. So
Mm.
just because you fucked with it now, now it looks dated.
Mm.
But I
All the
do. Sorry.
Landspeeder needed was a little bit of color correction. That was all it needed.
So
Um,
that's not actually true. I know. You guys know why he did the remastering in the first place?
no, enlighten me.
Okay. So George Lucas is part of those directors and producers of film who's very heavily invested in saving and conserving and restoring film stock. And of course, as film, because it's made on film, ages, it degrades because of what it's made out of. And unfortunately, he went back to have a look at the film stock, the original film stock for Star Wars, Empire Strikes Back, and Return of the Jedi. And what he discovered is that some of it was literally unsalvageable. It could not be restored in its current form that without serious money and technology going into place to actually fix it. So there was actually a very likely possibility that the original Star Wars in particular, but even Empire Strikes Back, might actually get lost to time. And this happens with movies from time to time. Things just degrade so much because they don't, you got to keep maintaining things. They didn't have digital stuff back then. It was on film. So he said, well, I'm going to save the original Star Wars before it's gone. And while I'm doing it, since a lot of these scenes are, gone, they're going to have to be rebuilt from the ground up. We might as well fix all the problems I had with the movie in the first place. So that's where he started. Then he started down that process, and then he thought, well, if I'm going to do the first movie, and the process turned out to be really complicated, really expensive, and quite long, he thought, well, I should just do all three movies. And so he wound up doing that. And then he decided, well, if we can get them done in enough time, then maybe we just re-release all the movies all over again in the theaters. And it was the right idea, because if he had not done so, we would have lost Star Wars, the original vision of it, completely. And even though he made some changes, which he did, it just wouldn't be there. So
he messed with it too much. Like
he did, he did.
When you over edit something.
Yeah, but
In
literally,
many ways, the controversy also was a publicity of it in and of itself.
Yeah.
Also, he may have just been involved in a really bad marriage at the time and just locked himself in the editing room. There's that to consider.
Well,
he seems like the kind of guy who would just shut out people that he's not a very communicative guy.
Yeah.
I've met people like him.
Yeah.
What are you working on?
But the reality too is that the remastered movies, when they were released to the world, a lot of people were like, oh, remastering those movies, they're old movies, people have seen them before, it's not going to make that much money. No, it made a shite load of money. For 2 months, Star Wars, Empire Strikes Back, and Return of the Jedi spent 2 months in the top box office and made a bucket load of money for the time it was out.
It was a promotional tool for the prequels as well.
Mm-hmm.
Because we knew at that time we were getting new films. So, yeah, of course we're going to go revisit these films at the cinema and take our kids. But, yeah, it's weird that you say he was all about sort of preserving film, which I understand, but it's also the same guy that just sold everything to Disney as well.
Yeah.
Which is quite ironic.
Well, he sold it to Disney to start up that museum, remember? So he is. I mean, look, you can sell stuff to Disney and have a view of saving film. And that was originally his first issue, was that the original film stock of Star Wars was really on the verge of being unrecoverable completely, and lose it all. So that's why they started that process.
So, yeah, I respectfully disagree with the Greedo. I'm one of the people that is really hard on the Greedo shot first thing. I think Han shooting first says so much to me as Han as a character. And one of the reasons why Han is one of my favorite Star Wars characters of all time, because you don't fuck with him. He hasn't got time. He hasn't got time for your bullshit. He is that cool Clint Eastwood John Wayne type character that like some guy sits down, talks a bunch of shit, and he's just like, "No, get fucked, mate." Bang. I'm out of here. It just means sorry, someone's
Yeah, he
mowing
wouldn't.
lawns.
He would never have taken the job from Ben Kenobi unless he was hard up for money, like
Yeah,
seriously hard up for money. So
and it just
there was that. It established.
it
It was
leads to
established that he was a marked man.
his whole redemption arc, you know.
He had to get out of town because he'd just murdered
Yeah,
somebody.
yeah, and he also, remember when he does the job and he drops Luke off and Leia off. They're going to go do the Death Star, and he's like, "No, I'm out of here." So, my neighbour's mowing his lawn. I don't know if you can hear that. Is that coming through?
Can't hear a thing.
Oh, cool.
Yeah,
I can hear it.
You can?
Yeah.
I'll go on mute while I'm not talking. But yeah. Anything else on the on this redemption? I'm just going to go close my door.
We're about out of time anyway, aren't we?
almost.
We're getting close.
I think.
Do we have any letters from viewers this time?
Yeah, I think what would have been nice to have happened with the remastered versions is that we got the original vision, a version that was the original vision, and then we got his director's cut. Because a lot of directors like to do, a director's cut. Their vision that they would have preferred to have. You don't often get a chance to go back and do those sorts of things, so I can see that being, worthwhile. I think we needed to have the remastered, otherwise we probably would have lost Star Wars, the original film stock completely, and its vision. It would just not exist anymore. And there were some significant changes and improvements. And it's a whole new generation that got to see Star Wars, Empire Strikes Back, and Return of the Jedi many, many years later, after the rest of us have grown up and we're adults. You got a whole new generation who get to watch it at the theatre, probably for the very first time, and never seen it on TV or on video at that point, or VHS if there was VHS.
They've also grown up with it as well. It's been a part of their lives, just like us.
So
I always think I feel sorry for people that watch it knowing the twists. Going in knowing that Darth Vader is Luke's father from the outset.
Yeah. I could say one controversial thing is that I don't think George Lucas is a genius. I think a lot of the Star Wars is a product of the people who were advising him around him and helping him with concepts and stuff like that, concept art. A lot of rewrites of the scripts. His script writing was terrible. He's probably not a great person to deal with because I can't imagine having a conversation with that guy or getting directions from that guy. He'd be like, yeah, I think he's like, he seems like the sort of person who you wouldn't know whether he was serious or not because he's always monotone. He's a very monotone dude.
I feel like going out and yelling at my neighbour.
Yeah, he's also done some questionable things with like property ownership and things like that in real life, which I wouldn't agree with.
We also have to remember too, like he's also the person who gave us Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Yeah,
he wrote that, and it was designed to be cheap, since Spielberg was having trouble keeping his budget under control, and so was George. So they wrote it to be cheap but entertaining, and that movie itself. If you think about it, there's not a lot of dialogue in that movie. It's mostly action. It's an action thrill ride, really, out of everything else. So
Raiders of the Lost Ark, I think, is more his forte. Right, he sort of knocked it out of the park with Star Wars, but it was a group effort, and it was right time, right place sort of thing. I think the best thing he did was hand it off to Disney. I think some of all the series and stuff that we've had since have been just a testament to how good Kevin Feige and was it Kevin Feige?
No, he's nothing. No, Kevin Feige's got nothing to do with it.
Catherine Kennedy.
Kathleen Kennedy.
No, not Kevin Kennedy. The other guy.
Dave Filoni. And
Filoni's like the heart and soul of the lore, and then the dude who played Happy
did Iron Man.
Favreau. Did Iron Man.
Talking about
Favreau.
So Favreau brought cool back to it. He told us like why the Mandalorian is cool, and all this sort of stuff. And I don't think like the more George Lucas gets involved, the more it's like not cool. It's not cool. There wasn't enough cool in the
We'll
prequel
cover
movies.
the Disney Plus area.
Yeah.
All right. So yeah. Do you want to sing the letter theme? We've got 10 minutes.
Yeah, let's do some letters.
Okay, quickly. AJ normally sings it for me, so I know when to edit.
Bring the letters.
All right. So I asked, do you think a director has the right to revisit and alter their film after it's been released, or should the original version be preserved as it is? Additionally, what's your favourite and least favourite moment from the trilogy? So,
As an artist,
Mr. Fred Huber, got back to us. I oppose the CGI update making the original version unavailable. I think it was better before. Too many people will never be able to compare. That is fair. John Shepherd, the additional Jabba scene from the 97 remaster is my least favourite moment. However, I think that the remaster of the Empire is actually better than the original. I didn't object to the original special edition changes. However, I got annoyed that he kept tinkering with it after that. So he has, I think when he released it to Blu-ray, I think he did another tinkering as well.
Yeah.
Return of the Jedi, instead of it being Christian, it was the little kid Anakin, I think it was, and as a Force ghost at the end of Return of the Jedi. So Anakin's literally gone from an older guy to a younger guy, and now he's almost a baby.
He's that kid. What's that terrible film? He's from that terrible Schwarzenegger Christmas film, Jingle All the Way. He's in that as well, isn't he? Yeah. Steve Little. I think that they can tinker as much as they like, but new versions should be alongside the already released ones. They shouldn't just disappear. I got the 5 version box of Blade Runner, for example, and it's up to me which version I want to watch. As for Star Wars, the Jabba scene is just stupid. I don't know what he was thinking, but the Cloud City in particular in Empire has been improved.
The Sarlacc pit
Jeff
was
Snazzle.
really awful, like the updates to the tentacles and stuff like that, because it looks CGI, it looks really bad, and it's unnecessary.
Yeah. Jeff Snazzle says, I think it's fine if they want to go back and tinker. At the end of the day, it's theirs, it's their work, but not when they make the original versions unavailable. His least favourite moment is from Return of the Jedi, when the Super Star Destroyer crashes into the Death Star. I don't think the special effects look very good, even back in 1983, and it always takes me out of the film. His favourite moment is when Vader is bearing down on Luke in the Death Star trench run, and all seems lost. I have you now. And then Han turns up, and the Falcon, with the Falcon, and fucks it all up for him, and that slow pan down from the credits. Yeah, that's a great scene when Han shows up. That's up there with for me with Captain America getting Thor's hammer as a sort of,
Right. Yeah, of all the spaceships I've ever wanted to pilot, the Millennium Falcon is right up there, and the Liberator from Blake 7.
Yep. Gail Hanna. I honestly nearly choked up when I saw Jabba and Han talking. What the fresh fuck? Totally unnecessary, and I felt like I was being gaslighted.
Wow. Okay. Passion. I feel your passion.
So people have opinions on it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Pretty consistent opinion there.
Yeah, I can agree. I think just making it unavailable is the sin. Like they shouldn't just make the original disappear.
Yeah, that was a cash grab.
Yeah. And that's about it. I think we've pretty much covered everything that I wanted to talk about.
Yeah, the three of us didn't get into a heated fist fight either. Over a video call. It was good.
True.
We'll see. I think that's gonna, when we get into the later films, that might get more. I think Last Jedi is going to be the film that might divide us.
I think it might divide us sooner than that. And
You had me at drinking blue alien seal milk. Just so much of it. Just so much of it.
I don't have much else to say about the originals. You guys got anything?
Long live Star Wars.
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah. It's a part of my soul. What can I say?
Yeah, it's it has Well, you can see I'm surrounded by Star Wars memorabilia, so
Mm.
it is definitely something. I am a very original Star Wars, and something I've learned to appreciate as because I dungeon master for 20-year-olds, and their love for the prequels, which we'll get into at some point. You soon realize that everyone's generation has their own Star Wars films, and
Yeah.
maybe I shouldn't I shouldn't be so harsh on the ones that I don't like. But yeah, these are my ones.
Be so much a harshness on one particular character.
Oh, that's my favourite character. He's the best. He's the best villain. Jar Jar Binks is the best villain. I really miss is we never got that that Sith Lord lightsaber wielding Jar Jar Binks that we really needed in the end. But anyway,
Yeah, well, we'll get into the prequels
He's much
next,
better
I
in the
guess.
Clone Wars. Much better in Clone Wars.
Which is I love the prequels. It's all about New Zealanders and tax.
okay, we definitely got to finish here. We really got. There are too many jokes to be
tax
made about
collectors
this.
here.
Pay your bloody taxes.
Dad, are you exploiting the New Zealand taxes because tax dodge? Yeah.
Yeah.
And that story will also be told.
Anyway, thank you, everyone. And that is good night from me.
It's good night from them.
It is good night from somebody else.
One day you'll get good night to them, good night to you. I don't know.
Out of the three of us, you look like you just woke up. So,
and I'm just going to
be.
All right, thanks, everyone.